A lot of our popular fantasy stories are post-apocalyptic in some way. I use the term loosely here, no nuclear missiles or rogue comets required, but there's usually some sort of fallen empire or ancient civilization that isn't around anymore, which forms the backdrop of the story. Whether that's the Netherese from the Forgotten Realms, the Protheans from Mass Effect, or the Gunslingers from, well, the Gunslinger, there's some precursor to whatever passes for civilization in the story's present day, something that was bigger and better than what's around now. Those precursor civilizations are responsible for the wonders, the magical items, and the ruins that now inhabit the story's modern-day world. I'm reminded of Matt Colville's video about Dead Empires, where he talks about how the characters of The Lord of the Rings inhabit a world and fight in struggles that are pale echoes of greater and grander things that came before. The world of Middle-earth isn't what one might consider post-apocalyptic at first glance, but it is populated with old ruins and relics that hint at ages long past, like the Mines of Moria or the statues of Isildur and Anarion. Just like The Lord of the Rings, our stories and games almost never take place in a time where the magic of the world is being born and the wonders are being built. No, our stories and games take place later, when those amazing civilizations have fallen to time or calamity, their treasures scattered, buried, and forgotten. When you start laying the groundwork for your new world, start thinking about the civilization that came before the characters arrived. What civilization was around 1,000 years before these characters stepped into the scene? And why isn't it around anymore? What did it leave behind? What do its ruins and relics look like, and how can your characters find them? These are big questions, and there's a limitless amount of potential detail to unpack. Are they not around anymore because of a natural disaster? Were they wiped out by an alien race or a war with another civilization? Or were they perhaps a technologically advanced civilization that fell to their own machinations for the sake of short-term profit? As for what they left behind, try to start by figuring out the religion of the civilization. Unless they're rather atypical, a civilization's religion would have informed a lot of the relics that they leave behind, especially those of a magical variety. All of the magical swords your characters uncover might have the same holy symbol etched into them. Or maybe there's one symbol on weapons and another on armor representing two different gods. The sky's the limit here. There's a lot of questions to answer about a precursor civilization, more than I've brought up here. But when you have at least some of them answered, you really start to pave the way for an amazing and deep world full of adventures. And speaking of adventures, I've got a book of them launching on Kickstarter right now that you need to see. Come and step into a land beset by evil where nightmares roam free. Libris Nocturnum is an anthology of 13 adventures for D&D 5th edition that take characters from level 0 to level 12 and features over 30 new monsters that will hunt and haunt them across the land and into the Nightmare Realm. So if you're looking to strike back at the things that go bump in the night, if you're ready to raise your sword and push back the darkness, step into the pages of Libris Nocturnum and back us on Kickstarter. I'll put the link right in the description down below. That being said, let's continue on with our post-apocalyptic world building. Building a fantasy world is more than just sprinkling a few ruins and relics here and there. You also need to know what sorts of people live there. And unless your world is particularly tiny or has a really good reason not to, it's going to have at least a handful of different cultures. These may have even all stemmed from that precursor civilization and branched off when it fell. Including different cultures in your fictional world serves multiple purposes. First and foremost, different cultures provide a way to illustrate that the world is bigger than your characters. Often, characters start their journey somewhere that's familiar to them, the Shire, for instance. However, circumstance or necessity almost always forces the characters to venture outside of their comfort zone. That's all part and parcel with the hero's journey. It's on that journey that characters encounter people that are different from themselves. Whether they're friend or foe, part of the point of these people is to illustrate a larger world than that little area that your characters start out in. What they're used to isn't all that there is to the world. There's other types of people and other cultures to interact with. Also, those different cultures provide a sense of progression in our stories, like when Frodo gets to Buckland and then Bree and then Rivendell. Each of those places is populated with very different people who each have their own unique culture. The Shire folk live in hobbit holes underground. The Bucklanders don't mind water. Bree is full of humans and houses, and Rivendell is full of elves. These differences not only tell us more about Middle-earth, but also signal that Frodo has journeyed quite a ways. When laying the groundwork for your new world, think about what cultures you'd like to include and where they live. How do their histories tie back to the ancient civilizations that aren't around anymore? What are their goals as a people? Try taking a real-world city and turning it into a place in your new world. Grab a few stereotypes of that city and run with them. My friend DM Andy gave me an example of doing this with Seattle. So to turn Seattle into a fantasy kind of post-apocalyptic city, we're going to make the main focal point of it a spire called the Needle. This is a relic of the ancient civilization. It rains almost constantly here, but nobody's entirely sure why. Maybe it has something to do with the Needle. And the rain creates a haven for moss monsters off in the countryside. The people inside the city absolutely love their coffee, and it's a huge part of their daily routine and their culture. There's even a crime syndicate that controls the coffee bean trade. You can do this with any large city you can take off of a map, and you can boil them down to their essence to create unique and memorable cultures for your world. There's one thing that's true in a post-apocalyptic world. Somebody, somewhere, is trying to acquire power. More than likely, a few somebodies. Even if your characters aren't directly involved in any struggle for power, those struggles provide an excellent backdrop for any story that the characters are involved in. Part of good world building is creating a world that feels like it exists independent of your characters, and conflicts that don't involve them are a good way to do that. Nothing says, "I'm not the most important person here," like a full-scale war raging off in the distance. These types of struggles don't need to be wars, though. It could be two farmers arguing over property lines, or politicians backstabbing each other to gain favor with a local lord. No matter what form it takes, when you add a power struggle to your world, it's important to identify not only who the participants are, but what they're trying to do. Most often, there's only two options: gain power or maintain the status quo. Let's take a look at a couple of stories that are set against the backdrop of a power struggle. In The Lord of the Rings, Sauron is seeking to reunite with the One Ring so he can rule over all of Middle-earth. He's trying to gain power. Meanwhile, Elrond and the Fellowship are trying to destroy the ring to maintain the status quo. On the flip side, in Star Wars, the original trilogy that is, the Empire is in control of everything and they're building the Death Star to maintain the status quo. Meanwhile, Luke and the Rebellion are doing their best to gain power so that they can fight the Empire. As we can see, good and evil don't really play a role in who's trying to gain power and who's trying to maintain the status quo. What does play a role is the character or faction's relationship to the status quo. Are they okay with it? Well then great, they'll fight to maintain it. If they're not okay with it, then they're gonna try to gain power to change it. Whether your characters get swept up in these conflicts is another question entirely. Maybe they don't get swept up at all and these conflicts keep happening in the background, chugging along and providing a living, breathing world. That's okay too, because not fighting in somebody else's war leaves a lot more time for exploring the mysteries of the world. What good is an ancient civilization or dead empire if they don't leave behind at least a few mysteries to be solved? What is Stonehenge? Why did they draw the Nazca lines? Why is there a terracotta army buried in Yang Jifa's backyard? Part of the fun of inhabiting a fictional post-apocalyptic world is figuring out its mysteries. Placing things in your world that the characters don't immediately understand adds a sense of mystery and wonder, and since mysteries are meant to be solved, they can give the characters something to do. Do you see those grassy mounds in that valley over there? Those are either barrows full of zombies and treasure, or they're an ancient artillery array, once used to repel an unimaginably terrible foe. See that small pyramid over there? 99% of it is buried underground, and if you can get inside, there's some sweet alien technology to unlock. Those obelisks? Ancient teleportation network that will only work after you've recovered the 3 missing MacGuffins. Mysteries like these provide no shortage of things for characters to chase after as they explore your world. I mean, just look at how many History Channel and TLC shows there are about big rocks being put into places where big rocks shouldn't be. With any fictional world, there's a lot of lore and detail that you'll want to give to your reader or player. After all, they can't experience the world if they know absolutely nothing. Somebody's got to give them a hint about where to start looking for treasure, or give them the call to adventure. Where would Bilbo be if Gandalf hadn't knocked on his door after all? Chances are your characters know very little about the world. That gives your readers and players the chance to learn about the world right along with them. So it helps to have a wise character that knows more than them, who can tip them off and point them in the right direction. However, despite the term lore dump, try to make them more of a lore trickling faucet. This avoids lengthy exposition and gives the reader or player something to figure out on their own. Rather than handing out a quest to
Fetch the sword of Agarian from the Cave of Defilement.
they could just say, I found an ancient scroll. I could barely make it out, but it mentioned a powerful weapon in a cave that should be nearby. Then let the detail of the sword and the defiling nature of the cave come about organically. With all the work that you put into creating your own fictional world, it's natural that you'd want to let readers and players know all about every little detail. But short of having a character ramble on for hours or publishing something like the Silmarillion, don't do it. Leave some stones unturned and some regions left uncharted. Blank spaces on the map can be your best friend when you need a creative outlet or your players just want to go exploring. If your readers or your players know everything about the world, after all, what's left to discover? Like P.T. Barnum probably, supposedly said, always leave them wanting more. And if you want more adventure, back Libris Nocturnum today. The link is down below, if you dare.